I think it's because we're brought up thinking that, okay, so after you date, then it's marriage and you're good. That's the only person and you shouldn't have any problems, no divorce, blah, blah, blah. But then you get in it and you're like, oh no, there's a lot more to this than just staying,
not.
Right? Than just staying.
Yep.
There's like work that needs to be done.
Right.
Hi, I'm Gabby.
And I'm K.A. Will.
And welcome to K&G Culture, season marriage journey. Thank you for following us and listening to our videos and podcast. We appreciate all of our listeners. We started this podcast because we thought it was very important to share that we can all create our own culture within our families. We all come from different backgrounds, and then with getting married, you're trying to create this new family, new system. And it is hard, but we just wanted to share our experience and hope that it helps to stimulate conversation between partners so that we could be intentional in creating our culture. So today we are going to go back over review some of our videos that we've done, the ones that seem to have resonated with a lot of our audience, and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, because we just realized that even before our marriage, that we don't have to have the same exact atmosphere or whatever we saw going on in our parents' home. So that's where we realized that we are responsible for like the culture we create in our home, like as far as the decisions that we make, the morals that we teach. How we raise our children, all those type of things. And as Gabby said, we want to go over, these are really the topics that you guys interacted with the most throughout the year. And one of those topics was healthy conflict. So, and I find that interesting because I'm wondering if there are like guys or even women out there that were like me that didn't know there was such a thing as healthy conflict, because it's like we hear that word conflict, and for a long time I associated it with only a negative connotation, that it was only negative things could be related to conflict. Right. But in marriage, especially early on, I had to learn that wasn't true. That you can have conflict and it be healthy. Did you have anything, out of healthy conflict that you learned or you experienced with us or that you want to mention?
So conflict has a negative connotation. It might equal fight to some people in their minds. It has to be someone is fighting if they're having conflict. But from... what was I doing? So I was looking at... So I heard this quote that 69% of disagreements are from fundamental differences between the spouse. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And so just figured out that from the Gottman literature that we are just inherently different, and we might always have the same conflict. Like 69% of them are going to be the same issue. So, like, for example, we are always going to fight about time. And that's just what it is. Kareem is more conservative of the time, wants to be on time or even early. Because early is on time to Kareem. And me, I'm like, on time is at that time or 15 minutes after. But, so I'm more looser and he's, like, more strict. So, we're always going to have a difference in that. And no one has to change. Like, he doesn't have to become like me, and I don't have to become like him. But we do have to meet each other in the middle. But that's one fundamental difference that's, unfortunately might always cause conflict, but it's now going to be our way of responding when that comes. Like, when we have to deal with our perspective on time. Like, if we're going to an event or something, like, hey, like, we might have to wake up early, or... it's not that serious. People are going to be late, so let's be late too. But just finding ways to lessen the intensity of those arguments and those fights, because we know that we are different in this way. So that's
Yeah.
my hope is that we'll learn like healthy conflict with those things that make us different.
Yeah, and the other thing, going along with what you said, that just having those differences, I think personality, character traits, differences as well, they're gonna cause conflict in any relationship, but especially as one as close as a marriage. So I had to learn that as well. That Gabby is gonna be loud about certain things where I would want to be more quiet or like some quiet. Trying to think what else. She's out of the two of us, she's the more outgoing one, so I would want to stay home for certain days or to do certain things, and she would want to go out. And that's fine. But I just had to learn that and get used to it. Like, okay, we're two different people. Yes, we're married, but everybody still keeps their individuality in that way. So yeah, that was something else that I realized. Could you think of any other topics? I think I may have some, but can you think of any other topics that people really interacted with the podcast on and realized, either they left a comment or the one that had more views or interactions, and why do you think that was that they related to those?
Before I answer you, I had another comment about the healthy conflict. So I think of how your parents say certain things, and before it used to make you cry, it used to make you mad, and then as you get older, you kind of just shrug your shoulders or let it roll off your back, or you do like this, you get tense for a second, and you like calm down, right? So that the hope is like with marriage, is like, you know what? Sure, we're different this way, but why let this be a reason for further disagreement and for us to have a bad day? So some things you're just gonna have to swallow. Some things you just have to, and then let it go. My sting. But the hope is that as we. All right. So I found that why is marriage hard? One that a lot of people resonate with. Shoot, it was a 2-part series. So, because it's such a common question that is hard to answer or to put into words. And so I think we did a good job of trying to break down some of the things that we found for why marriage is hard. But what we found were that you really have to kind of change and reshape how you approach someone, because the way you approach your family is one way, but how you approach your spouse is a different way, especially keeping in mind their personality, their love language, what makes them tick, what makes them happy.
But isn't that part of, not to cut you off, I'm sorry, but isn't that part of the whole culture mindset that we based our podcast on? Like,
right.
The fact that you don't have to do the same thing as your parents. Your household doesn't have to feel and have the atmosphere of your parents. That when two different people come together, it creates something totally new.
Yeah, not just you don't have to, but you really shouldn't, right? Like, it has to be, because everyone's different, right? Yeah, so it's going to be a different approach to life, a new way to life. So yes, breaking down things that you learned, things that you have to unlearn. Again, changing, the reshaping, all of those things are painful, take time, take lots of failure, lots of missteps to finally to create that culture that you both want. And it's still, after 8 years in marriage, we're still not there. So it's a lifelong process. So, and like I always say, I compare it with trying to let the spirit take over and breaking down the flesh and trying to keep the flesh tendencies away so that you can do the right thing. Because, pride, all these things try to get in the way of what? Self-preservation. I don't have to do nothing for you. I don't have to change for you. I want to be myself because change is painful. So those are some things, and having to read the room and where someone might not be feeling well, you have to pick up the duties, or vice versa. You're not feeling well, you got to rely on your spouse.
But something you said, does that change is painful? Does change always have to be painful? I mean, I ask that because it's like, to me, yeah, there are some times where change is painful,
Mhm.
but is that because of us not wanting to change?
Mm-hmm.
Is that because of us wanting it to be easier?
Mm-hmm.
Because one thing I will say is change is not always easy, but I don't necessarily think that change has to always be painful. I think that's because of the growth that needs to happen in us or our spouse, or the fact that we want to do it ours, or like you said, we don't want to change. So that's what makes it more painful. So
Yeah.
maybe the lesson in that is be more open and be more willing,
Yeah.
and then we'll realize that it's not as bad as we thought, or it's not as painful as we thought.
Great point. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that was a good topic as far as, like you said, why is marriage hard? That is, and it's funny because people ask that question whether you're married or not. People want to know, like, we hear people say, "Oh, marriage is hard." Well, what do you mean by that? So yeah, I think that was a good episode. Another one that stuck out to me was definitely, Head of Household was another one, where we live in this world where people are finding their independence, they're finding their power, they're finding their self-worth, and traditionally, men were head of household, but we have this generation of women who feel empowered, and rightfully so, because women are doing a lot more things, or being recognized
Right.
for a lot more things that they knew and know how to do. So I think that was a good episode, because now when you have two independent people come together, two people that know their worth, there's going to be a kind of tug of war sometimes as far as decisions being made in the house.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's the main thing. Decisions being made in the house, finances, how conversations are led,
Mm-hmm.
that type of deal, raising the children.
Right.
But there's something that I learned from all of that, and even in what you mentioned in Why is Marriage Hard? So there's these lessons that we learn along the way, and lessons, necessary things that happen naturally, or there's conflict, and then you realize, oh, there's a better way to deal with this, or there's a better way to do that.
Right.
So the caveat, I think, to that is remembering those lessons. Like, even though you went through something like together, and it was a conflict, you learned a lesson out of it, it doesn't mean that you won't face it again.
Right.
I mean, even up until recently, for me, I'm just like, why do we have to go through this again? Why are we dealing with this again? Like, I guess in my mind, I like when I learn a lesson that is like one and done. But like with marriage, I'm realizing that is not the case. So
Same thing for raising kids.
hmm.
They don't get it the first time. Raising adults. They don't get it the first time. Raising children of God.
Yeah.
They don't get it the first. Perfect God, huh? Gave you everything you need, and we still.
Mm.
So trying to, and which brings me to another point or another video, trying to manage those expectations, and realizing which ones are unrealistic,
Right.
and which ones need to change, and which ones need to be adjusted, especially as you learn together, as you grow together. I think that was an example of expectation that needed to be adjusted. That I'll speak just for me. I'm not gonna get it the first time or the 30th.
Whoosh.
But I can almost promise you that I'll get better. You won't have to say it as much.
That's a good one.
Say it as much, and it'll be the time between the interval will be longer and longer.
Mm.
But I'll need reminders. So
Yeah. And along that same vein of the expectations, I think sometimes, I think a good question to ask for someone thinking about getting married or in a serious relationship, excuse me, living together is, do you have to be perfect to be in a relationship? Like, do you have to be perfect to be married? And the answer is no. Because first of all, no one's perfect.
Right.
But then the other thing is, sometimes we give off that energy even though we know that's not true.
Right. Right.
Like, we know that people don't have to be perfect or are not perfect, and that we're not perfect.
Right.
But still, for some reason, there's that expectation of that person being perfect. There's that expectation of that pressure, even you put on yourself, to be perfect. Like, some people may call it the honeymoon stage.
Right.
But the problem that you run into with that is, now that pressure is there. And you're putting that pressure on that person, you're putting that pressure on yourself, and it causes issues. Not that the person, and what's funny about that is, and that's why we have to be careful, like we said before, about expectations. Just because the pressure is there, like, that person is not doing anything wrong necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
You're not doing anything wrong necessarily, but the pressure
Mm-hmm.
is causing issues between you
Mm-hmm.
because of that expectation of perfection.
Right.
So to me, it's better to find someone that you can relate to. Like, you guys have a lot in common. You guys get along. Most of the time, relatively, right? And that you guys have that connection and grow from that. So instead of perfection being the model, taking what you guys have in common and let growth be the model. Like, how can we grow together?
Right.
So I think that is way better.
Right. Yep.
So
Definitely agree.
yeah, so I'm trying to think, is there any other, like, topics and stuff, the ones that people interacted with the most? Because I realized what was a running theme, like, with everybody, was any episode that we did about problems,
Mm-hmm.
any episode that we did about like balancing your life and your spouse changing,
Mm-hmm.
any episode that was about that,
Yeah.
those were some interactive ones. And again, yeah, you'll see your spouse grow.
Right.
You'll see them change. And we talked about how some people think that change is bad. Like, in the other person, when you see the other person changing, you're like, okay, you're changing on me. This is not the person that I married. This is not the person that I dated. And you start thinking, okay, are they now showing me who they really are? Was it all a facade? Or is this growth? And change is not a bad thing. And I just realized sometimes it's growth. And growth to some people looks like change, and some people associate some change with something negative.
Right.
But really it's just growth. So we learned that you have to give your spouse that grace to grow.
Right.
So-
So that's an unrealistic expectation that who you married is going to stay the person that you married.
Stay exactly the same.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Like I talked about my change in being more assertive and being more assertive, honest.
Yeah.
Not that I wasn't honest before, but some things I just didn't share or really thought, I'm going to hurt this person's feeling if I say that. But now I'm like, honesty is the best policy.
Right,
So that caused some tension. But I had to realize in myself, I'm changing, and then I had to communicate that to Kareem, whether he knew or not, but just like keeping open communication. Hey, I'm changing. I'm trying to grow. I'm learning something new, or I want to try this out and see, will this serve me, right? Because what used to serve you before might not serve you now as you're moving forward in your marriage journey. Man, there was something that you said that I loved, but But yeah. So setting those expectations, even for yourself, for what you expect from your spouse, that they are going to change.
The
And that's
pressures.
okay. And just because y'all both feel the pressure, but y'all don't know what it's from.
Mm-hmm.
Let me not say y'all. We both felt the pressure. We didn't know what it was from.
Keep it real, bro.
Yup. Well, like you can't put your finger on it. You're like, what is this? I'm just mad, or I'm just mad at him, or he did something I didn't like. But yeah.
And that goes back to recognizing your own feelings, because like you said, we don't take the time to do that. A lot of times we react instead of taking introspect.
Yeah, reflect.
Like reflecting on yourself, like, why do I feel this way?
Yeah.
And then allowing your spouse to have that time to do the same, for them to do it for themselves as well, and you taking the time to understand them. So instead of reacting, asking yourself, like, why is he acting like that, or why is she acting like that?
Yeah.
Is there something underlying that we needed to talk about that we didn't talk about?
Right.
Is there something that's bothering us that they did and we didn't voice it? Because again, keeping that door of communication open, that is so important, because if your spouse is going through something, whether it's because of them or because of you, or whether it's something personal or not, if they don't feel comfortable enough to come to you, it's gonna cause a rift.
Right.
Yeah, it's gonna cause that rift.
Yes, I remember. So you said that a lot of the things where a lot of the videos that talk about problems or issues in marriage seem to resonate with people. I think it's because we're brought up thinking that, okay, so after you date, then it's marriage and you're good. That's the only person, and you shouldn't have any problems, no divorce, blah blah blah. But then you get in it and you're like, oh no, there's a lot more to this than just staying, right? Than just staying.
Yep.
There's like work that needs to be done.
Right.
So I think probably resonates with people because we're trying to be transparent. We're trying to show that it is a journey, right? You're not staying in one place. You're not staying, you're moving, you're progressing. So we really do hope that these videos help to, again, stimulate and create conversation, things that you didn't think about before, or you did and maybe need to revisit. Because these videos help us as much as they help you guys. But we do hope that they're purposeful. So.
Yeah. And we're trying to get used to the notion of saying podcast.
Oh, yeah.
So when we say videos, we know it's a podcast. Yeah. And we know some people watch, some people listen. But yeah, we just wanted to recap that. If you guys have any other topics for next year that you want us to revisit, or new topics, or if you think we missed some that this past year that you thought were one of the highlights of the videos or the podcast that we did, then let us know. Let us know in the comments. So we're going to say bye for now. We thank you guys for joining us for another episode of Our Marriage Journey. We are K&G Culture, and we want to say bye to our culture family because we consider you guys family.